Sasuke's request to see Danzo upon reaching the gates of Konoha was met with a lot of suspicion, of course. There was a bit of a delay until Itachi could reassure Danzo, and he could collect enough bodyguards to feel secure in the meeting. Sasuke stood in the Hokage's office, and the Hokage realized exactly what Itachi had done, and he was momentarily at a loss for words. Eventually, Danzo leaned back in his chair and stared at Itachi. "You have truly outdone yourself this time." "Our deal," Itachi said, "shall be honored. With a compulsion, I can actually trust him more than most of my regular forces." Danzo looked at Sasuke. "It seems you might end up redeeming both yourself and the Uchiha clan after all." "I would sooner our name fade into oblivion," Sasuke said, staring at Danzo with all the venom he could muster. "It is fortunate then that it is no longer up to you," Danzo said. "Now show me the eye." Itachi twitched a little, but knew he was in no position to object. The crow that contained Shisui's left eye had followed Sasuke and was sitting perched on his shoulder. This was exactly what Shisui didn't want. Itachi thought and then closed his eyes in resignation. How did it all get so messed up? At least Shisui hadn't been reanimated. His body was never found, and Danzo didn't want to risk the eyes by extracting DNA from them. When Danzo removed the eye from the crow and held it in his hand, he said, "Reunited, at long last." Though he hadn't yet implanted it, he could already feel the connection. Danzo concentrated hard on that connection, and the beginnings of a small skeleton green Susanoo appeared around him. The Susanoo was an ability all Mangekyo shared, but it required both eyes to unlock. The chakra drain is significant, but not much more than the eyes I've lost in the last fight would have consumed together. Lord Hokage, I must repeat that time is of the essence. I must go and prevent the A-Tails from being captured by the Akatsuki if that is still possible. You can go as soon as I summon your reinforcements. The souls of the previous Kage are all sealed in the belly of the Reaper, and I don't know how to get them out. But there are still plenty of strong deceased Konoha shinobi to choose from, and your orders are to capture the A-Tails for Konoha if possible. Killing it is only a last resort. Due to Danzo holding the impure resurrection, Itachi wasn't in any position to argue. Go, tell my root to prepare the sacrifices. In the direct wake of Pain's attack and Naruto's defeat, Sakura first tried to confirm that much of the nobility still supported them. In smaller nations obviously, but even in the lands of earth, water, fire and lightning, the decision to attack them didn't seem like a popular one. This was first to reaffirm their logistical support network. However benevolent their intentions were, the ideal seekers were a rogue military without a home base. For them to continue existing as they did, they needed local support, or resort to what was essentially banditry. Naruto had said that they disband before resorting to that, and Sakura agreed. Second, Sakura wanted to show Naruto's followers the world hadn't wholesale rejected them as it had felt like when 4 out of the 5 great villages had attacked them. They were in fact very popular still, and all those who had participated in the attack on them had grown less so. And yes, Sakura still saw them all, including herself, as simply Naruto's followers. It was she that had decided what they stood for, and the rest of them just strove to follow her example. Lastly, Sakura had wanted to reassure the world at large that their group would continue to function as before to the best of their abilities. As for their actual mission to be heroes, the first thing that drew their attention was that people all over the world, or rather outside of Fire Country, were disappearing. Abducted, all signs seemed to point towards. The ones who are being targeted tend to be those with the fewest social connections, Kakashi told her the report. Couples aren't targeted if they have young children to take care of. It seems like the perpetrators are looking for those society would miss the least. We aren't sure, but I think they are being brought to Fire Country. And unless we have another group of rogue ninja on the scale of the Akatsuki running amok, this could only have been done by Konoha. But why? Human experiments? Kakashi suggested. It wouldn't be out of character for Danzo. Yet being this blatant about it is. We won't be the only ones to suspect Konoha, and Danzo should care about how the world views the leaf, for purely pragmatic reasons if nothing else. A lot had been done in the past to advertise the Leaf as the nice ninja village. It was effective marketing that made the population of Fire Country and beyond come to them to solve their problems. It was why Konoha had become the most prosperous of all the great villages. For Danzo to sacrifice that so blatantly, this had to be big. So what will we do about it? Kakashi asked. Before Sakura could answer, a disheveled looking Hinata stumbled into their tent and meeting. I need help! Ask Sasuke. He might be more inclined to help you than he did us, Sakura said coolly. What happened, Hinata? Kakashi asked, and she told him of their confrontation with Danzo. I know he went to Konoha. I tracked his path there, but I couldn't enter that place on my own. I need your help to rescue him. No, this is rich, Sakura thought with dark amusement. I begged Sasuke to save Naruto, and now he needs my help? We can't help you, Sakura said to both Kakashi's disappointment and Hinata's dismay. We already had more important reasons than this to investigate the Leaf. People have been disappearing and we suspect they are being taken there, but it's simply not possible. We don't have the ability to oppose one of the great hidden villages directly. Especially if they now have access to a reanimation jutsu like you described, and have control over Sasuke, who is now stronger than ever according to you. Sakura leaned back in her chair. If we still had Naruto, maybe it would have been different. Are you holding a grudge? Hinata asked. Isn't that exactly what Naruto wouldn't want anyone to do? I know she'd want to help us. Sakura's temper flared. How dare she? Outwardly, she kept her cool expression. You're right on both counts. I don't particularly want to help you. And also, Naruto would want me to anyway. Helping all we can is the goal. But the fact is, we can't in this case. So it looks impossible. So what? Didn't Naruto show that the impossible path is worth walking? She would try to help, regardless of the odds, because it was the right thing to do. Sakura gave a humorless chuckle. Right again, Hinata. Naruto would surely find a way. However, I am a far lesser hero than she was. Then I must go alone, Hinata said, knowing she'd stand no chance. When she tried to leave, Kakashi grabbed her shoulder. I am not going to let you throw your life away. Sasuke needs me. Nobody else is willing to help him. Sakura started to feel bad when she saw Hinata's eyes water from desperation. I am willing to help him, Kakashi said. Get some rest, Hinata. We'll talk when you have a clear head. You're of no use to Sasuke like this. Hinata seemed to struggle with herself for a bit, but eventually said, Yes, Kakashi-sensei. And she left. When they were alone, Kakashi just stared at Sakura. I didn't lie. We really are in no position to challenge a hidden village by ourselves, if we even should. We are trying to remain neutral, remember? Even ignoring Sasuke, there is a line, and kidnapping innocent people is over it. Eventually, a group that makes claims to heroism needs to make a stand. That was true, Sakura knew. I know. I'm not ignoring it, but I have to think within the bounds of what is possible. We can storm the Leaf Village. But, so far, there is a pattern in who gets kidnapped. We can use that to predict where they might strike next and hopefully save some people. You think that is enough? Kakashi asked. Of course it isn't, but we don't have Naruto anymore. I'm not just talking about her leadership, but her value as our best field agent. She was the biggest stick we had to swing at the great villages when they got out of line. She could fatten armies by herself. Without her, we have to be more careful. Sakura sighed. Besides, I think this problem may end up solving itself. To attack the civilians of the other nations all at once, this blatantly, it will force the rest of the world to respond. We may just see the other great villages teaming up to deal with Konoha before too long. And if they do, will we help them? Kakashi asked. Sakura made a face as if tasting something sour. With the exception of the Sand Village, all the great villages had attacked them before. The loss of Naruto was in large part to blame on that attack, so Sakura felt reluctant to help any of them, for any reason. What Sakura felt was irrelevant though. She'd followed the ideal that Naruto had given her. It was ironic that the village Sakura minded the least was the one headed by Ino's murderer. Sakura ignored Kakashi's question. What has me worried is that this is all a very dumb move by Danzo. I could see him doing this, Kakashi said. I am not talking about how evil it is. I'm talking about it being stupid. Last I heard, Konoha was on the back foot in the war. They really can't afford the rest of the world making a united front against them. Yet Danzo isn't a fool. He must know all this too. Maybe Danzo counts on the other villages being unable to work together in this. Or he may feel like he no longer has anything to lose by grasping at straws. Maybe. Sakura mused, feeling unconvinced. And worried. Danzo had just won a big victory against Sasuke. Sakura doubted the man felt very cornered right now. But Danzo, whom Sakura considered a very logical and extremely pragmatic man, think he could take on all the rest of the world combined with the help of his reanimation jutsu and win? The Akatsuki had already made an attempt at Killer B actually, in the form of Hidan and Kakazu who had attacked him when he was away from the cloud on a mission related to the war. B had been able to fight and escape from those two without too much trouble, but the attack had spooked Raikage, A, enough that he refused to let B go on missions anymore. Hiding was an option, but A would rather B stay near the Cloud Village so he could keep an eye on him. They knew B was the last free Jinchuriki, and that Naruto had fallen. But even if this Pain person were to show up personally, A thought that he and B could fight him off if they worked together. A complete profile of all of Pain's abilities had been established thanks to the very public battle between him and Naruto, which would no doubt be useful for the Cloud if they had to fight the same battle. Contrary to what they had expected, it wasn't Pain who eventually showed up, but Kisame. Pain still wasn't fully recovered from his previous battle with Naruto. Obito would have actually preferred to come himself, and he would if this failed, but he would rather avoid that. The reason was that he didn't trust Nagato and Konan anymore, and was thus reluctant to leave them alone to plot. Now, we do know that Kisame can take B in a one-on-one fight, because Kisame did canonically beat B in what was technically a 2v1. B had help from one other Cloud Ninja. B only survived that encounter because A showed up in time. So in this case, where Kisame initially fights B in very similar conditions as what Sasuke canonically did, he should be taking this. I think we might have underestimated him. He absorbs our chakra and just continues to grow stronger. You fools ain't cool, the sword striking a chord, we're getting floored. Though my rhyme sublime, this is now a crime, losing power, soon will cower, damn you fool. We should have just gone all out from the start. A Bijudama could have taken him out then. Now he might just survive it, and we can't afford to waste any more chakra. Our best strategy is to stall and wait for reinforcements. My man A joining the fray, saving the day, that may. B? No wait, that didn't rhyme. Maybe Spree-Key... Focus B! Yuki yelled. That rhymed! Thanks, Aci-B! Though he was losing, he was on a roll today. That's it exactly. In order to conserve chakra, B had resorted to simple kenjutsu swordsmanship. That he was now playing for time meant that he had given up on winning on his own, since in a 1 vs 1, time was always on Kisame's side, given he was constantly absorbing his opponent's strength into Samehara. You have my respect as a swordsman, 8-Tails Jinchuriki. Never seen anybody wield 8 blades so expertly at the same time. You're my style weapon that smile at someone vile, you fool. Oh, that's a little harsh. Kisame arched his sword backwards, leaving himself open. Instincts kicking in, B slammed 5 of his 8 swords into Kisame in that one instance. Kisame ignored this and swung Samehada with all his might. B tried to block with 2 of his remaining 3 swords, but they were snapped in 2. Normally B reinforced his blades with lightning chakra, but Samehada simply absorbed it. Without that, B's blades just couldn't handle the strain. B was sent flying, low on chakra and wounded. Kisame also looked wounded on account of 5 swords sticking out of him, but he just pulled them out one by one, and the wounds started to close, using the chakra he had absorbed throughout the fight. End of the line for you, bastards. You bastard, I ain't a bastard. Come on, my dad was married to my mum. How nobody has killed you before now is a mystery, Kisame deadpans. It has been tried, usually they're the ones who end up fried, you fool. Well, this is for all those poor sots then, Kisame said, and went to finish the fight by cutting off B's limbs. He had to be fast, reinforcements would likely arrive soon. A high kick sent Kisame flying before he reached B. The Shark Man was expecting the Raikage, but this wasn't him. Itachi, shouldn't you be dead? I am. It seems being dead isn't as final as I had assumed. Sounds interesting, but all that really matters now is this. Are you getting in my way? I am afraid so. Figures. Killing my own comrades for the sake of the mission is an old habit of mine. Kisame had, of course, wondered what he'd do if he ever needed to fight Itachi for real. Because of course he did. Obviously he wasn't going to look him in the eye, but he'd be wary of genjutsu all the same. Samehada had a mind of its own, so it could theoretically breaking out of any illusion. But Kisame wouldn't put it past Itachi to put his freaking sword on an illusion as well. Itachi would know about Samehada, of course. But most of all, Kisame figured he should just come at Itachi with the biggest ninjutsus he had. Itachi could match him in this, but not for very long. Stamina had always been Itachi's main weakness. If Kisame was going to win this, that would be the reason. The flaw in that plan was that Kisame knew jack all about the Edo Tensei. Itachi couldn't run out of stamina, and so his primary weakness was no longer relevant. Giant tsunamis clashed against waves of black flames. The fires consuming the water so thoroughly there wasn't even any resulting mists or vapor. It didn't evaporate, it simply ceased to be. Killer B tried to keep a low profile. He probably should just run away now that he had a chance, but he wanted to see if he could exploit the situation. When Kisame froze up, being stuck in a powerful paralysis genjutsu, it was B who saved him. Not that he didn't want Kisame dead, but he was going to support whoever was losing at the time, dragging this out. Giving time for his reinforcements to arrive. Which meant he was mostly going to be supporting Kisame, since Edo Itachi is more than a match for any version of Kisame. Samehada actually ends up giving B back some chakra, because for one, he's the only reason Itachi isn't just winning, and two, Samehada just really likes B. In canon, the sword actually ends up betraying Kisame for B. There isn't much hope for Kisame completing his mission, however, and he knows it. Especially when the Raikage finally arrives, accompanied by his own honor guard, Sia and Darui. Itachi, do you really think you can keep fighting both me and all these other people at the same time? The Itachi Kisame was familiar with would at least have been breathing hard at this point, yet this wasn't the case. In fact, Itachi was also just way stronger than Kisame remembered across the board. Edo Itachi is getting close to the upper echelons of ability that exists with Naruto Shippuden. Edo Itachi is a match for Eternal Mangekyo Sasuke, who himself is on a level with canon Naruto when he's fully cooperating with Kurama. There are still forces that are above him, like true Madara, Hashirama and Six Paths characters, but honestly not much else. Even if I didn't think so, I still wouldn't assist you, Kisame. Itachi's priority number 1 was hinder the Akatsuki. They couldn't be allowed to gather all 9 Bijou. Capturing the 8 Tails for Konoha was secondary. That is a shame. And Kisame rushed at the Raikage and his entourage. He might be able to steal some chakra from the small fry and gain the strength to continue pushing on. Instead, A met him and together with B cut off his head with a double lariat. Now, this is something Kisame could actually survive in canon. Somehow. And he does so here as well. Somehow. But he is fleeing at this point. The Raikage addresses Itachi next. Your interference gave me the time to arrive. You are scum, but I'll give you this one chance to crawl back to whatever hole you came from. That I cannot do, for multiple reasons, Itachi said. 1. The commands that Danzo left him didn't allow that. 2. Itachi himself thought the cloud wasn't able to defend the last Jinchuriki when Madara, Obito himself decided to try and come. Die then, Ei said simply and attacked. Ei had the reputation of being the fastest ninja alive ever since Minato died. But we know Itachi easily scales him, so you can at least keep up with Ei. One-on-one Itachi takes this, but there are other factors at play here still. When Itachi presents his Susanoo, Ei said, "B, enough playing around, crush this little man with all you have." "I'll help my brother, against this final bar it's pointless to even bother." And he transforms into the full 8 tails. He begins to charge up for a powerful tail beast bomb. The chakra Samehada gave him back made this easier. Though Kisame did manage to take Samehada with him when he ran. Before B could launch the attack, however, golden chains bursted from beneath the ground, wrapping themselves around the octopus. "I raced on ahead to make sure the Akatsuki didn't succeed, but it did not come alone," Itachi said. B struggled against the chains, but found that his strength was being sealed somehow, suppressed. "This technique, it can't be." Ei recognized it as an Uzumaki sealing jutsu. When it became clear Uzumaki Narako didn't know anything about the techniques of her forebears, Ei thought those had been lost to time. "I cannot say I am happy to be here," Kushina Uzumaki showed herself. "But there is a beautiful irony in me helping to steal a Jinchuriki from the cloud, don't you think?" Kushina's chains had been strong enough to restrain the full Kyuubi, and that was when Kushina had been near death. Needless to say, Gyoki and B didn't stand a chance to resist these. Lightning exploded from the Raikage and he tried to blitz towards Kushina. Incredibly, Kushina caught Ei's fist in the palm of her hand, and as she did, her body exploded with golden chakra. Enhanced with the Kyuubi's chakra cloak, she kicked upwards, her leg impacting Ei's chin. The blow lifted him off his feet, and a second kick sent him flying into a nearby mountain. In canon, Minato did seal half the Kyuubi's chakra in himself. I am making a small alteration, saying he sealed it in his wife instead. Kind of like a compromise between what he and Kushina both wanted. Now hang on, because this is about to get complicated as I explain the reasoning behind this new thought process beyond it simply being cool. First, Kushina's body was just more suited to it, and more importantly, if Minato did seal it in himself, that would, as far as he knew, forever seal half of Kurama's power in the belly of the Reaper. I don't think Minato knew he was ever getting out of that. In this new version, the plan was for half of Kurama's chakra to be sealed in Kushina, who would die. Minato could do what he did with Naruto seal, with Kurama's chakra slowly merging with Kushina's chakra, except more accelerated. Of course, Kushina is dead, so any chakra that merges with her fully would simply, per the rule of tail beasts reforming in death, return to the living world, and, following the natural order of things, merge with the Kurama in Naruto. That way, over a very long time, Kurama would slowly become whole again, and their daughter would gain access to the full power of the Nine Tails, but only over a period of decades, more than enough time for their child's body to get acclimated to housing such immense power. This means that Kushina doesn't quite have half of Kurama's chakra anymore. Instead, it's more along the lines of 25% of it. Now, full power Kurama is easily stronger than all the other tail beasts combined, so that still leaves Kushina with a power that's on the level with something like the 8 tails, but not much more than that. This Yin Kurama wouldn't allow for his power to be used in such a way, but Danzo simply used his Sharingan to force the issue. And so Danzo had finally gotten his perfect Jinchuriki soldier. Kushina had also been given as much autonomy in her reanimation as Itachi, and served willingly. Upon her revival, the first thing she did was inquire after her daughter. When she learned that she was captured and presumed dead, she had lost all interest in improving this world, or in the morality of what they were doing, and she just wanted revenge against the Akatsuki, which Danzo promised she'd have a chance to deliver after the other villages were taken care of. Ei didn't stay down and immediately charged back in with a new understanding of his opponent, but this time Itachi got in his way, the Totsuka blade slamming down in the way of his path. "Are you sure you have the time to deal with us, Raikage?" Itachi nodded in the direction of the Cloud Village. "I reiterate, we did not come alone." Explosions could be heard in the distance. I have faith in the caliber of my ninjas. We won't fall to any army Konoha can muster. And he zipped over the Totsuka blade at Itachi, hoping to smash through the Susanoo. Itachi could have done any number of things to avoid or block the attack, but he didn't. He just stood still, deactivated the Susanoo, and allowed A to rip through him. Itachi's arm was torn off, as well as half of his chest. Itachi ignored this, and turned to face the Raikage. Do you see now? And in that moment, Itachi brought the Susanoo back, and his body was regenerating. You can't kill me even if I stand still and give you a free shot. Know that all the forces attacking your village share this ability. Also know that the Hokage understands that it is people that make up a village, not mere buildings. Itachi didn't actually know whether Danzo knew this, but the undead army would go after the people, if for no other reason than Danzo still needed more human sacrifices, and he'd prefer to take them directly from the hostile villages. They will be the target, and will need your help. Can you really afford to waste your time with us? A roared and tried to karate chop the Uzumaki chains holding his adopted brother, but they were unbreakable even to him. It is not easy to choose between love and duty, Itachi said. I have been struggling with reconciling them as well. I am curious to see what you'll do. And he turned to Kushina. Take him and go. By now the Eight-Tails chakra was completely suppressed and B was back in his base form, helplessly bound in the chains. In a manner not unlike how Narako occasionally carried people with her hair, Kushina runs with a bound B hanging behind her. Itachi followed her. He cared far more about securing the Eight-Tails than ensuring the Cloud Village's destruction. A frantically gave chase, but Itachi easily manages a fighting retreat. He could use shadow clones after all. Brother, this ain't correct. The Clouds are people, they are yours to protect. Eventually, A's sense of responsibility won out over his love. He roared in frustration and anger, and turned back, swearing that he'll come for B soon. The chance of retrieving this Jinchuriki alive is almost negligible, Itachi thought, looking at B. This man died as soon as the Raikage gave up the immediate chase. For all that A cares about B, in the end, duty won out over love. Such is what it means to be a shinobi. Itachi considered himself fortunate that he himself had been able to juggle his duty to the Leaf with his own selfish desire to protect Sasuke. Sasuke didn't have his freedom and would likely hate him forever. It didn't matter. So long as the Leaf endured and Sasuke lived, Itachi would consider his actions a success. Now, as we talk about how the Cloud defends itself, we must talk about Hidan of all people, who funnily enough is still alive in this story. Now, that man is considered an S-rank criminal who most jonin apparently can't deal with. And almost his entire gimmick is being immortal. Now, realize that every single Edo Tensei has that quality just by default. In fact, they have a superior version of it, since they can reform on their own, which Hidan needed Kakuzu's help for. A Edo Tensei needs to be sealed or imprisoned, which they will of course do everything in their power to prevent. They could blow themselves up with impunity to escape from any bindings. A seal to stop them should theoretically be possible, but that would take research and experimentation to find. Or someone who knows the Edo Tensei a lot better than anyone in the Cloud does. The only thing holding them back was that those who didn't serve willingly tended to have their mental capacities reduced. All of that is to explain why the Cloud Village simply loses this battle, even after A joined the fight. The man simply didn't have a way to put down an Edo Tensei permanently. What his presence did do was buy enough time for most of his non-combatants to evacuate, and transport or destroy anything that would be of value to the invaders, mostly information. He also managed to capture and restrain a handful of Edo Tenseis for experimentation later. In the Lands of Water, Haku was freezing the ground before him, using the ice to glide and increase his speed as well as to throw off pursuit. He raced across the battlefield which stretched on for miles, freezing enemies solid as he passed them. On average, it seemed to take the undead about half an hour before they broke free, either under their own power or through their fellows shattering the ice. Some reanimated Uchihas also seemed capable of melting it, Ever since the battle started, Haku had been acting as a one-man reserve force, going wherever he was needed. Upon his arrival, the enemy's advance would be halted, the battle would stabilize. Then, Haku would be needed somewhere else. He'd leave, and less than an hour later, the place he'd just come from would have collapsed into a rout. There just weren't many ninjas who had an answer to a foe that couldn't die and automatically regenerated from all injuries. Given time, their researchers might discover a way to undo this reanimation jutsu, but Haku feared it would come too late. The attack had come with very little warning. All across the battlefield, and including the hidden mist village as well as the surrounding countryside, in several miles radius, a thick unnatural fog hung over the land. This wasn't there because of this battle specifically. When Zabuza had taken over, there had been many who had questioned his rule, calling him a tyrant. Feeling the need to spy on his own people, and there not being enough ninjas whom he could trust, the mists had been Zabuza's answer. Zabuza was now always perfectly aware of what happened within his mists, which had come to cover the land. It was something not unlike the rain that Nagato caused to fall over rain country, if not as vast in scope. At first, Zabuza had only been able to cover the now more aptly named Hidden Mist Village, and only a few hours a day at that. Over time he had grown more proficient, and the mists never left anymore, and every year expanded further outwards. Zabuza told Haku that one day he hoped his mists would stretch from one end of Water Country to the other, and maybe even beyond. Suddenly, in front of Haku, the mist coalesced into an image of his master. Haku knew this was just a projection. Don't bother, Haku. It's clear we cannot hold out here. Then what will we do? We'll evacuate, of course, taking what valuables we can with us. We'll return once we have found a solution to this crisis. Until then, we hide. We are surrounded, Haku pointed out. Even the sea that bordered their village was swarming with the undead. Some of us will stay behind. They'll make a push to break out, drawing out and concentrating the enemy's forces on one spot. The rest of us will slip out through the cracks. I'll make my mists even thicker so they don't notice us. Not even the Byakugan will be able to pierce it. Suicide mission, Haku thought. I volunteer to stay behind and help save our people. Don't be stupid. I need you to stay for a while, but only to sell the deception. Deception? I have compounded a list of the shinobi who made a habit of criticizing my rule. They will be the ones we'll sacrifice. If I only pick them, however, it will be too obvious and they'll mutiny. So you, my most useful tool, will accompany them. However, your mission is to survive for 30 minutes, give or take, and then flee. I'm confident you could escape if you only need to take care of yourself. If our forces are still doing well at that time, attack them on the way out. I want no survivors from that group besides you. Haku felt sick, but said, Yes, Zabuza-sama. His master's orders were absolute. With the stone village... Stand and fight! Onoki, the third Tsuchikage, shouted as he disintegrated yet another reanimated corpse. He was shouting more to wrap himself up than anyone else. He was one of the very few defenders who were still denying the undead access to the stone village. Surrounding him were hundreds of corpses of stone ninja. He was also, and had been from the very start, one of only a handful that could permanently put down an Edo Tensei. If he disintegrated them completely with his particle style, they didn't get back up. But if he left so much as a single toe, that was enough for them to reform. The sun had been high in the sky when the fighting began, and it was deep into the night by now. Stand and fight! Kurotsuchi landed next to her grandfather. She had been fighting at the start, then taken a wound, retreated, and Onoki hadn't seen her since. Alright, Gramps, time to go. They'll only enter the stone over my cold dead body, Onoki spat. He moved on to attack another zombie, but fell to his knees from his back acting up. Kuritsuchi and Akitsuchi grabbed him and jumped up a wall. Everyone in the village is already gone. You're protecting empty buildings at this point. I gave no order to retreat. No, I convinced them. staying here was a slow and sure death by attrition. Not me. My predecessor swore me to the defense of this village to my dying breath. Kurotsuchi shook her head at her grandfather's stubbornness. It had often been a source of comfort and strength for them all, but now it was a problem. We, and above all you, must survive to find the source of this evil and put a stop to it. All of that made sound logical sense, but Hanoki would still rather die than grant the enemy access to the stone village. Protecting it had been his life's work. He had sacrificed countless lives towards that end. So how could he give up on it just to preserve his own life? Kurotsuchi read all of that in his expression, and so when he turned from her, she delivered a precise chop to the back of his neck, knocking him out. That is our Kage, Kurotsuchi. This is too far, don't you think? Akatsuchi said. He'll forgive me, Kurotsuchi said, and hoped. She handed Onoki to Akatsuchi. Kurotsuchi, Akatsuchi, oh my god, these names. If we live, Akatsuchi said. They were surrounded. The Edo Tenseis had taken the opportunity to swarm around them during their brief conversation. I was counting on him to fly us to safety. We shouldn't rely on Grams for everything. Kurotsuchi made a large sequence of hand signs. Lava-style scorched earth! Nearly as far as the eye could see in one direction, the ground liquefied, causing all the Edo Tenseis who were still there to sink below their waist. Most had at least one hand stuck, which would hopefully prevent them from casting jutsus. Akatsuchi stared wide-eyed. It was easy to forget Kurotsuchi came from a line of Kage until she did something like this. Kurotsuchi wobbled unsteadily on her feet from the exertion. You see? Don't underestimate. And she started to fall backwards. Me. Akatsuchi caught her and slung her over his shoulder. Now, with two unconscious people to carry, Akatsuchi started to run. The lava trap wouldn't hold them off for long. Gaara listened to the report of one of their border patrols, feeling calmer than he felt he should. This doesn't make any sense, Elder Ibiso said. He was one of the most important voices left in the Sand Village now that Lady Chio was gone. The Leaf Village is supposed to have its hands full with the other 3 great villages. Why go after us when we've done our best to remain neutral? Maybe it's part of an agreement we're unaware of? Tamari guessed. Fire Country gets to expand in Wind Country, cloud into the lands of frost and hot water, earth into waterfall and grass. You were not listening to the reports, Gaara said. These invaders aren't like anything we've ever seen before. There is a new element at play here, and it raises another possibility. That the Leaf now thinks it can take on all the rest of the villages combined. The resulting moment of silence felt ominous as they all considered that possibility. Regardless, we no longer have a choice. We have to defend ourselves, Tamari said. No. I will defend us. All of you are to prepare everyone to evacuate in case my fears prove true. Have you forgotten the last time you tried to play the hero and defend everyone by yourself? Tamari asked. Trust me, Tamari, I am very much aware of my own limitations now. I will try to be as safe as possible, but if I can't stop this, I fear you also won't be able to. Perhaps this is me being overly paranoid, and you'll soon hear to cease the evacuation. But I'd rather be too careful here. Many, including those he trusted most, continued to object, but Gaara put his foot down for once. If we don't need to leave, I will let you know. If you don't hear anything, you continue. Find out what is happening in the rest of the world and go from there. Gaara didn't stay to listen to any further objections, and flew out of the window on a cloud of sand. He hadn't lied. He really was going to be careful. There was nothing like having a rogue ninja defeat you on your own turf to teach a man humility. He was approaching this on the assumption that whatever he was facing was stronger than him. As soon as he saw any sign of the invaders, he fully submerged himself in the desert, using artificial eyes to keep track of what was going on above. Gaara had no way to disable an Edo Tensei, but he, more than any other Kage, was the most successful in holding them back. The Edo Tenseis all found the sand beneath their feet turn into quicksand, except way worse. Gaara couldn't kill them, but he could bury them far beneath the surface. The Irotenses that were earth-natured might eventually break free, but that would take a long time, and Gaara could prevent it if he was allowed to focus on being a jailer. But there was a single man who hadn't been caught. Not an Irotense, who now flew over the desert on a giant eagle. Sasuke Uchiha. Gaara recognized him. He had gone rogue years ago, briefly joined Naruto's organization and then left after she had been captured. Gaara had no further news on the man. The easiest method to learn more was simply to ask. From Leaf Shinobi to criminal associate, to joining a humanitarian relief organization, to joining the Leaf's now new imperial ambitions. You are a hard man to figure out, Sasuke Uchiha. I assure you I am not here by choice. If you can kill me, Kazekage, do so. But try not to die yourself. I won't be allowed to hold back. In the air, a spectral figure appeared around Sasuke, and shot an arrow at the desert below. The sand was loose, so it was mostly blown aside, leaving a giant crater that quickly started to rebalance itself. More arrows followed, Sasuke firing off these castle-destroying attacks as if they were cheap kunai. Yes, I am indeed facing a force far beyond my strength, Gaara thought. One direct hit from one of those and he was finished. Not only that, they were fast. He'd have no chance to react to them once fired. Gaara knew that the only thing keeping him alive was that his enemy couldn't sense where he was beneath the desert. Gaara couldn't just stay and hide though. If he did that, then Sasuke could just move on to the sand village and destroy it, something he apparently had the firepower to do. Gaara sent giant tentacles of sand up from the desert, seeking to grab Sasuke and pull him down. Sasuke dodged easily and shot more arrows roughly where the appendages were coming from. Gaara had grown wiser since his defeat at Deidara's hands though, and made sure to be a lot less predictable. Gaara wasn't where the origin of his attack suggested he was. If only I could land and maybe give you a small chance, Sasuke said, scowling. Sadly, the chains on my mind prevent me from deliberately being a moron. And Sasuke ordered his eagle to fly towards the sand village, guessing that Gaara would need to expose himself to defend it. Sasuke was right. Gaara had to up the pressure on Sasuke, or maybe give him a more tempting target to destroy, namely himself. Sorry, Tamari, Gaara thought, and emerged from beneath the desert. Gaara next used the desert sand to cause a giant whirlwind to appear around Sasuke and block his path. Sasuke had grown to ridiculous levels of power with the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, but the eagle he was using as a mount hadn't, and it couldn't just move through the obstacle. This was costing Gaara a lot of chakra, but by his estimation it should buy him enough time. As soon as Gaara saw the arrow appear from the Susanoo, he disappeared beneath the desert again. The speed of the arrow he couldn't react to, but there was a small delay in the materializing of the arrow and it being fired. That small bit of time was enough for him to hide deep enough that the explosion from the attack didn't knock him out. A nice try, Sasuke complimented. But there is clearly a limit in how far you can control your sand. I can't fly through it, but I can go over it. And his eagle shot into the sky. Gaara had no choice but to emerge again, to keep close to his enemy and keep the cage of swirling sand around them. Now, the whirlwind of sand wasn't just a cylinder around Sasuke, but an actual dome. Gaara was outside the dome. The sand obscured Sasuke's vision, so he again would have trouble aiming at Gaara. Nice work, Sasuke complimented again, sincerely glad that his advance was stopped. Amaterasu could fully consume sand, but not in this volume, and it was moving so fast and chaotically there was no way for him to use it to make an opening. However, Sasuke could prevent Gaara from gaining a visual on him as well, by destroying any eyes that materialized within the dome of sand. Once he did so, Sasuke dismissed his summon, causing him to freefall. While he could have used the Susanoo to fully protect his summon, that would interfere with the air under its wings, so either way he'd be freefalling. The Susanoo protected him once he hit the bottom of the dome. Any unprotected person would have been torn to shreds by the fast-moving grains of sand. Once he broke out, his Sharingan eyes focused on where Gaara was. He was flying on a cloud of sand. Sasuke Susanoo materialized another arrow and launched it before Gaara could flee again. It was a perfect hit, but Gaara's body was revealed to be a sand clone. Gaara himself had been hiding in the cloud he had been using to fly. Gaara could try to flee beneath the desert again, but when he saw Sasuke falling with his glowing eternal Magiko Sharingan, Gaara actually thought he had a real chance of attacking Sasuke now that he was without his summon. No matter how powerful or fast he wasn't freefall and had no leverage to move around anywhere. Gaara used the dome of sand above Sasuke and used it to grab him, or rather, Susanoo. Sasuke was still safe inside of it. The dome of sand lost its form in an instant and fell down faster than gravity would dictate. The sandstorm coalesced around the Susanoo, first binding its arms, and then slowly covering it until Gaara had him completely trapped. "I take no joy in this, but you did ask," Gaara said, reaching out a grasping hand. "Sand coffin!" In Gaara's experience, nothing alive could withstand the pressure the sand coffin could bring to bear. He kept at it until he could sense that the volume inside had collapsed, indicating that the Susanoo had failed. "I am sorry," Gaara said. "As am I," he heard Sasuke's voice echo from nowhere, and in the next instant there was a streak of light in front of him, and pain, and blood, and as he fell he saw the remains of what used to be his right arm falling as well. Gaara only barely managed to stop himself from falling to his death by letting the desert sand catch him. He didn't try to flee again as Sasuke slowly strode towards him on the ground. "When I fell out of your dome, you briefly saw my Sharingan. As soon as you did, you were under my genjutsu." "This isn't over," Gaara wheezed out. He was sitting slumped against a small risen pile of sand. Sasuke just looked at him with pity. "You're done. Does your village have someone else that can challenge me? As much as I hope it's so, we both know there is not. It is over. This battle, yes, but the war is not. And I won't let this be a victory for your master. My village should have emptied by now. At least Gaara hoped so. He bought as much time as he could. As for everything else, Danzo will find nothing of value here." Gaara concentrated, the desert rumbled, and Sasuke stared wide-eyed as the entire hidden sand village sunk beneath the desert. When he looked back to Gaara to congratulate him, Sasuke found that the Kazekage had again sunk beneath the sands, while he had looked away. "Well done, God of the Desert. Well done indeed." And Sasuke turned around, back to Konoha, where he would gladly inform Danzo of his failure. Gaara's immediate order to withdraw before even properly engaging the enemy meant that the sand took the least amount of losses of all the hidden villages. Just a few days ago, the sand had easily been the weakest of all the hidden villages. Yet after today, they would once again be on a more or less even playing field with the Stone, Mist and Cloud village. As for Gaara, he would be using sand as a sort of prosthetic arm from now on. Kiba was looking forward to just sitting down and giving Sakura his report after all the back and forth he'd been running. He'd been playing messenger between their faction and all the splinter cells of shinobi villages that now dotted the countryside. In order to make it harder for the zombie army to find and destroy them, everyone had split up their forces into smaller pockets, with only the central pockets headed by the Kage able to locate each one. Kiba had been tasked to, first of all, find these forces and open a line of communication between each of the big factions. Kiba thought Sakura would have been hesitant to get involved in the war to this degree, since it went against their usual modus operandi, but she hadn't hesitated once the news started flowing in. "As Kakashi told me, a line has been crossed and we can't remain neutral anymore. Danzo is ignoring us right now, but I suspect he'll come after us as soon as his main enemies, the other villages, are dealt with." Soon after, their group too had disbanded and scattered in order to make them harder to find and destroy. Kiba found Sakura in her command tent, looking to be in the process of writing a letter by some candlelight. "Kiba," Sakura said, gracing him with a smile. "You're back a lot sooner than I thought." I might not be able to deal with an Akatsuki member solo like Naruto, or you might be able to, but when it comes to finding people, I am your man. And I managed to contact the Tsuchikage and Kazekage. The latter is injured but recovering. They both agreed to your ideas of meeting the Lands of Iron. Itachi has already returned as well, carrying a similar response from the Raikage and Mizukage. Well, that was easy. I am not surprised, Sakura said, turning back to looking over our letter. It's obvious to everyone that we'll all need to work together to deal with this crisis. I suspect that all the Kage were sending out messengers as well, to arrange this very thing. We just facilitated it. The question is not whether we'll try to work out some alliance, but whether it will succeed. They worked together well enough when they were trying to kill us, Kiba pointed out. Sakura's mood seemed to plummet at that reminder. True enough, but that was on a much smaller scale. She rubbed her face. I might need you to deliver another message soon. She continued to stare intently at the letter in front of her. Are you alright? You look exhausted. The shadows under her eyes weren't just the lighting from the candles. I've not done much besides sit here and give orders. And write letters. Who is this one for? The Hidden Rain Village. Kiba blinked. You're not thinking of inviting them too, are you? I must rise above any animosity I feel for them if it helps us help people. That's what she taught us. But no, this isn't that. I'm asking after Naruto. Sakura was doing that thing again where she was using genjutsu to keep her emotions in check. Kiba learned to recognize the signs. You think she might still be alive? Probably not, Sakura said. And the following silence indicated she wanted to end the conversation there. Kiba wasn't having it. This can't be healthy, what you're doing to yourself. I understand you need to keep up a strong appearance for the world to see. But you don't need to do so with me. We're teammates, aren't we? Kiba waited for Sakura to talk to him, or just plainly tell him to leave, since he wasn't going otherwise. Sakura's shoulders eventually slumped, indicating she had released her self-hypnosis. I dream about her ever since, about what she might be going through, her last moments, the Nine Tails as well as every ounce of life being sucked out of her. But the dream doesn't even end there. Naruto is a famous kunoichi from a very strong bloodline. There is a lot unscrupulous research teams could do with her corpse. I picture men in masks and white coats dissecting her, dragging the secrets of her strong life force, senjutsu and what have you, out of her. She deserves better. Sakura tapped the letter in front of her. I might not have been allowed to try and save her, but at least I can beg for her remains to be treated with dignity. That's what I'm trying to do. Begging. You think that might work? They respected Naruto, even as their enemy. They might be willing to have some mercy here. Their respect for her didn't stop them from pursuing that goal. I know, but I get the feeling Pain and Conan aren't after military advancement in a traditional sense. Anyway, I won't know unless I try. I've been trying to think of arguments. Please, anything that might convince them. Kiba eyed the letter and moved his hand forward a little. May I? Sakura nodded with some reluctance. Just from skimming the letter, Kiba could tell this wasn't going to work. You've been suppressing your own emotions as you wrote this, haven't you? Yes. It helps me be more logical. Kiba could tell. The letter focused on all the good returning her corpse could be for the world. She was a symbol that gave many people hope, even now. She talked about things like morale, precedent, and she downplayed the benefits of fully exploiting Naruto's remains to the fullest. Logic isn't what you need right now. Their own twisted logic is what brought us to this point. Do you have a better idea? I couldn't say, Kiba admitted. But stop trying to suppress your emotions, it's not helping. It's helping me not fall apart, Sakura said, but took a new piece of paper and after hesitating for one moment, began writing again. Kiba felt awkward just sitting there in silence. Sakura's face looked more and more worn down, more vulnerable, with every sentence she wrote. Do you want me to leave? If he stayed, he suspected he'd see some tears before the night was done. I don't know. I might need your opinion again, and this needs to be done before morning. And still Kiba just sat there for at least half an hour. As he had expected, he saw tears. Eventually they grew so bad, Sakura obviously had trouble looking at the words she wrote down. May I? Kiba asked, when it was clear Sakura wasn't going to continue for a while. The hand in which she held her pen trembled. Her face was red, her eyes wet. She couldn't reply and just pushed the papers, there were several of them, to him. After reading it, Kiba said, if this does not convince them, nothing will. Sakura had shown a level of openness and vulnerability that was unthinkable to an enemy. Is it okay if I add something as well? Sakura looked surprised. You are not the only one that loved her. If there was more time, I'd ask even more people. If you think it will help, Sakura says. This will work, right? Has to. It will, Kiba says, and then acting on impulse, gave Sakura a hug she clearly needed. It was the thing that pushed her over the edge. Her body shook with quiet sobs. You weren't the only one who loved her, Kiba repeated and began rubbing her back. Sakura wasn't in a state to reply. There was nothing to do but stay there until she had gotten it all out of her system. When her body stopped shaking, Kiba released her. Thank you. Now I'm regretting that he won't be there when I'm going to meet the four Kage even more. They both knew Kiba couldn't be to Sakura what Naruto had been, but he was a friend. Probably Sakura's best remaining friend with Naruto and Ino taken out of the picture. Can't you delay? I'm a bit sad I'll be missing that as well. Sakura shook her head. Ninjas from the allied villages are in hiding, but Danzo's people hunting them. Time isn't on our side. Just be careful. Deliver your message to the first hidden mist ninja you see, and convince him to deliver the letter to Pain or Conan. I don't think either of them would harm you, but I don't want to risk it. And Kiba was gone by morning. When Sakura got to the secret rendezvous between the Kage, she was in for a pleasant surprise. It wasn't just the Kage who were invited, but also as many of the daimyos as were able to come. They too had a stake in this, and normally, Kages weren't allowed to make big decisions like this without the secular government's approval. The fire daimyo had decided to show, which meant that his guards were here, and that meant... Asuma grunted as Sakura ran into and hugged him. I can't breathe. Sakura released him. A little more and you might have broken my ribs. Seriously, you don't know your own strength. Sakura couldn't help it though. With Kiba gone, Asuma was probably the only person in the whole world whom she could drop her defenses around. Sakura had been a bit jealous of Hinata when she found a somewhat friend at the summit in the form of Suigetsu, who was part of the Mizukage's contingent. Because yes, Suigetsu had decided to just go back to the Hidden Mist after ditching Hinata and Sasuke, feeling like they didn't need him. Things have been hard on you, haven't they? Asuma said as he got a better look at her. Sorry, should have been there before. Your presence wouldn't have saved her. Still should have been there. But I'm not going anywhere this time until this current crisis is dealt with. The daimyo has released me to do whatever I may to help stop Danzo. He and his family will hide in the land of iron with the samurai in the meantime. Asuma looked towards the building where the Kage were arguing. It's not going well, is it? Can you help them make them see reason? Me? I'm just the bodyguard of the daimyo that lost his country. Actually, I was hoping to ask you the same. They will not listen to me. Honestly, what business do I have telling any of the great Kage what to do? Still underestimating yourself, I see. I'm being realistic. Gaara was someone who most jonin feared to face when he was a genin. Zabuza had a body count that exceeded all of Team 8 put together by the time he exited the academy. A is the son of the 3rd Raikage and was groomed for that position since he was young, and there are tales of him wrestling with the 8 Tails. Onoki is a veteran of every single ninja war ever, and is arguably the strongest elemental Kikigenkai ever. And me? I am the girl who lost in the first round of the Chunin exams, who could only get the pawn piece during your genin tests. The only reason I'm even a ninja is due to Naruto's charity. A pawn? Yes, not a bad analogy. That is what you are. What you were. You're right that you weren't that impressive at the start. But shogi is an interesting game. The hour is late, Sakura. Danzo making a grab for world domination, nearly all the tailed beasts are captured by the Akatsuki, Naruto and Sasuke both indisposed or worse. Pieces have been taken from the board. We are reaching the endgame, and you, the pawn, are now in a position of power. The other side of the board. You know what happens when a pawn reaches the other side of the board, don't you? I'm not that familiar with the game, Sakura admitted. And she calls herself my student, Asuma mumbled. It becomes a gold general, one of the strongest pieces. Pawns are easy to overlook and dismiss if you are a novice player, but the more experience you get, the more you realize that every piece matters. You think you are weak, but there's not a doubt in my mind that if you and I were to fight for real, you'd beat me. Be honest, do you really trust the Kage to handle this situation by themselves? No, I don't. They got us into this mess. Except for Gaara, but I refuse to rely on him for anything unless I have to. Sakura recognized Gaara's value, but she didn't think she could ever forgive him. No more than Naruto could. I'm not Naruto, however. I can't just walk into a room and be considered a dear friend by everyone there within the hour. I think you are right. Knowing Naruto, she would have had an easier time getting the Kage to respect and listen to her than you. However, I think she wouldn't be as good at organizing them after she got them. Yes, I'm a great secretary, but... Sakura stopped herself. She already knew what she needed to try and do, and figured she was just whining at Asuma at this point. She wasn't sure she could do as Naruto would, but she would just need to try. Alright, Sensei, I'll see what I can do. You are not less than them. Realize that, and then force them to do the same. Asuma said as one last word of encouragement. The Kage were sitting at a round table. I am telling you, I will trust no clout ninja to the command of someone of your choosing. A was barking at Zabuza. You barely care about the lives of your own ninja, let alone mine. You are too soft, Raikage. Your concern for your Jinchuriki will compromise your judgment. We need someone with a clear head, who can make the hard choices. Hard choices like using everyone but those most loyal to you as cannon fodder, Onoki griped. You are too transparent, Mizukage-dono. I, however, realize the gravity of the situation. All of our villages have been abandoned. We are refugees now. I know we cannot afford to be divided. Trust me to lead us through this. You say the right words, Tsuchikage, but you believe in such sentiments as much as I do. Someone must lead, and I have the most experience, and Konoha does not have a hostage against me. The Mizukage does have a point though, Gaara said. All of you have proven during this war that you'll do anything to gain dominance over everyone else here. Oh, but you? Ha! You only stayed out of the war because you were too weak to compete. And the Sand Village was steadily declining under your watch. I question your competence. Enough! Sakura stepped in and put her hands on the table. It is obvious none of you can trust any of the others here. You need an outsider. Someone who won't discriminate against anyone not of his own nation. Someone like you, perhaps? You're even greener than the Kazekage. The idea does have some merit, Gaara said. I'd sooner entrust my ninjas to someone like her than any of you. Of course my greatest ally here would be the one I hated the most, Sakura thought. She is a no one, Ace said. He came to stand in front of her, and his large frame truly towered over her. What great battles have you fought, girl? I might have been able to accept your predecessor, the last Uzumaki, but reports say you're not nearly as strong. What gives you the right to stand there and address us like you are our equal? I've wondered that myself, Sakura thought. I am the one who got the better of Uchiha Itachi twice. The same Uchiha you couldn't prevent to take your brother. While Naruto was out and about, dazzling everyone with her radiance, I was the one who did all the organizing. I was the right-hand woman of the greatest Kunoichi who ever lived. And I was the personal apprentice of the second greatest Kunoichi who ever lived, the great Tsunade Senju. Sakura could tell the Kages weren't impressed. Until that last line, surprisingly enough. Am I to believe you are Tsunade's apprentice? A glared. I met that woman. You are nothing like her. You are too weak and meek. Until just recently you were content to stand on the sidelines. You are a natural-born follower, not a leader. I am Tsunade's heir, Sakura said, taking the necklace of the first Hokage that she always hung around her neck and slammed it on the table. She entrusted everything to me. Then I pity old Tsunade. You are lacking in comparison to her in every way, from your mannerisms to your achievements to those pathetic excuses for tits. Tsunade never spoke of this man, Sakura thought. She didn't doubt him though. However disrespectful he was being towards her, he clearly held her own mentor in very high regard. And that actually caused Sakura to like the man a bit. A little bit. Sakura slammed her fist into her open palm. You want to take this outside? I'll show you just how much I am like Tsunade. A grinned at her. I have a better idea. A stood up, walked to and sat down at a stone table, and with one elbow on the table. Arm wrestling? Zabuza scoffed. A childish game. You should have just tried to kill each other. That's how real ninjas show their mettle. A didn't spare Zabuza a glance, and just looked at Sakura. How the hell did I end up in this situation? Sakura thought. But you couldn't back down now, and this was better than trying to beat one of the strongest ninjas in the world in a real fight. Sakura sat down in front of A, put her elbow on the table, and grabbed the Raikage's hand. The muscles of A's forearm were so massive in comparison to hers it looked almost comical. I once arm wrestled against Tsunade, A said. The stakes was the life of one of my comrades. She was a bitch for forcing me to go through such hoops. But she did save Karai in the end. For that she will always have my gratitude. So, does this mean that you defeated Tsunade in this game? Sakura asked. Yes. Sakura managed to hold herself back from gulping. Darui, A's main assistant, said, Shall I commence the countdown? A nodded. And Darui actually waited until Sakura gave the go-ahead as well. On 1. And Darui raised a hand. 3. Sakura focused her chakra into her arm, the way Tsunade had taught her. 2. Yet Tsunade had lost this same contest. Just chakra-enhanced super strength wouldn't be enough. Sakura activated her standard self-hypnosis genjutsu that's used for combat, slowing down time from her perspective. She had options, and this should give her enough time to use them before being overpowered. 1. Darui lowered his hand. The table they sat on instantly cracked where their elbows were placed. It was fortunate their table was one huge stone piece. If it was a standard wooden one, they'd be arm wrestling in the air. Sakura found her arm being forced back. Not bad, but you are indeed not on your senses level, he said. I didn't think this would be enough, Sakura growled back. And Sakura opened the first inner gate, and the surprise increase in strength was enough to stabilize their arms in the middle again. Well, I'll be, he grinned. That is indeed close to as strong as she was. His grin took on a mean edge. However, I've grown stronger since that time I met her as well. And lightning seemed to flow around A's form. If Sakura had been numbing her body's sense of pain, she'd have been unable to do anything but scream. As it was, Sakura was able to ascertain the damage to her body with a detached clinical perspective. A wasn't really trying to kill her with this, so it was fine. Pain was something that could only bother her if she allowed it. But even though she didn't feel it, her muscles did weaken from the extra strain. In her bullet time perspective, Sakura saw her arm falling to the other side again. If we're allowing jutsus now, then allow me to respond in kind, Sakura thought. With the physical body contact, she had the direct path she needed to her opponent's brain. Instead of a direct illusion, she instead chose to simply tweak with the neurons responsible for A's muscle control. With her perfect chakra control and Tsunade's guidance, she no longer even needed a hand sign if she had such a direct route. A found his arm going limp just before he could slam Sakura's hand onto the table. He disrupted his own chakra network almost immediately, regaining control of his limb just in time to prevent his own hand from slamming onto the other side. You do have a little bit of a reputation. Just a little. Enough that I was prepared for the genjutsu. But that was a particularly blunt application of it. A grinned again. I like it. Their contest of strength then got a second dimension, with both participants trying to mess with the other's body. Sakura by inserting a chakra and messing with his nerves and brain. A by a generous application of raw lightning chakra. Sakura was already forced to heal her own body to keep herself in the fight. Thankfully, her mental jutsus allowed her to focus on several things at once, so her own offense didn't suffer. Blood had started to drip down her eyes, nose and the corner of her mouth. It happened in an instant, without any warning. It wasn't like A was losing. Their arms were stable in the middle for now. Yet A decided he wanted to see how this girl would handle the maneuver that had beaten her mentor. And yes, A no longer doubted this was Tsunade's student. The palm of A's hand withdrew from Sakura's, only letting the tips of their fingers connect. It was an extremely small distance, but it was enough for A to leverage his greatest strength. Speed. Force is mass times acceleration. Combined with the laws of conservation of energy meant that the greater the speed he could apply in this small instance and distance, the greater force Sakura would need to prevent his arm from slowing down. Sakura had yet to display that kind of force she would need to stop him. Sakura's main talent wasn't speed, not at all. But what she did have, perhaps more so than anyone else alive, was reaction time. So when A started this move, she instantly responded, tightening her grip. And so instead of A's palm slamming into a stationary Sakura, it instead meant Sakura's palm also moving at him, the result of the tightening grip. Strength wasn't speed, but you could occasionally convert one into the other, like now. The collision of forces caused an explosion so powerful that many of the others in the room had to shield their eyes. The fuck is going on? Zabuza yelled. Interesting, was all Oroki said. You lied to me, girl. You called Tsunade the second greatest Kunoichi. She is first, A said, grimacing. However, and he redoubled his efforts. I still cannot entrust my brother's life to you. Despite everything, Sakura found her arm slowly being forced back. You have the skill, but you lack the resolve, child. How could you have? You're not even part of one of the nations under threat. You haven't lost a brother to this evil. How could you possibly understand? Those words infuriated Sakura like nothing else today had. He dares to tell me I don't know what it's like to lose a brother. She hadn't lost Naruto to the army of the dead, but she had lost her to this war. The villagers' greed for power is what led to the attack on their camp, which convinced Pain that cooperation was futile. She had lost Naruto to the flaws in the ninja system that created monsters like Pain, like Danzo. Flaws in this world that Naruto had trusted her to solve. And to do that, she had to win here. It only lasted a second, but A caught a glimpse of the diamond on Sakura's head glowing, lines starting to appear on her face. But most of all, A noticed a look in her glowing green eyes. A look that made mock of all he'd said. A look that spoke of a resolve and desperation that matched his own will to save B. In the next moment, the table finally exploded into pieces as A's hand was violently slammed onto the table. Most of everyone was looking at the scene open-mouthed while making ineligible noises. This included the Kage's guards like Tamari, Kankuro, Darui, C, and Sugetsu. This girl too has something important she is looking to protect. Haruka thought just as wide-eyed as everyone else. The Raikage didn't seem particularly upset at his loss, nor did he seem to care that he had broken several bones in his hand. He had no doubt that his Sakura could fix them. Alright, let it be known that the Cloud Village can accept the leader of the Seekers as the overall commander of our little alliance. Seekers being the common abbreviation of the Ideal Seekers. I've already said I can accept this, Gaara said. I suppose this is the best compromise everyone can agree with, Onoki said. Fine. On behalf of the stone, I accept as well. And everyone turned to look at Zabuza, who let the silence linger on for long enough for it to become uncomfortable. Fine, he said with extreme reluctance. So long as this means we can stop arguing and actually start doing shit, I'll accept. And just like that, I've become the leader of what is essentially the entire free world. Sakura thought. What do I do now? Sakura couldn't help but chuckle. Getting to this point and having no plan for what came next was just such a Naruto situation. We can't attack the Leaf Village without having some way to take out the other Tenseis. We need to find someone who knows more than we do. That or conjure up a sealing expert as well as an Tensei to experiment on. Sakura knew she'd have an easier time asking for a mountain of gold. Sealing experts of that level were exceedingly rare, even if you had a ninja village's worth of resources. We did capture several of those zombies, and I've had my people running experiments already, he said, standing up with one bloody arm hanging limp at his side. So far we've had no luck. We didn't take one of those creatures with us, but we did capture a pair of high-ranking leaf ninjas, who were surprisingly eager to share village secrets. And you didn't mention this before, he said. Onoki just shrugged. He hadn't planned to share anything until some form of cooperation could be finalized, which it now had. I'd like to meet these prisoners, Sakura said. Soon after that, and after she had patched up A's arm and hand, Sakura found herself standing over the bound forms of the Hokage's advisors of all people. How the hell did they capture you? I thought you both retired from fieldwork. No ninja ever truly retires. They go what we call the special reserves. We were looking for you actually, for the budding alliance we knew would form, Koharu said. Only the stone ninjas found us first. We just surrendered since we knew we'd be taken to where we'd need to be. You've turned on Danzo too then, Sakura guessed. Yes, lines have been crossed. There's not a single previous Hokage who wouldn't be disgusted by what is going on right now. Even Tobirama, who Danzo idealizes, wouldn't stand for this. We have come to share what information we can, and hopefully show the world that not every leaf ninja is party to Danzo's crimes. I never thought they were, and I never had any intention of destroying the Leaf Village. Sakura guessed that was the real reason they had come. It was my home too once. Others may not be so eager to share that sentiment. They'll have to listen to me now. I'm in charge. That news seemed a pleasant surprise to the both of them. We want you to know that we didn't know about the Leaf's part in the attack on your people, which resulted in Uzumaki's fall. We would have preferred to be working with her. Wouldn't we all? Now, Onoki said you had information. Danzo has long since turned Konoha into a fortress city. We can tell you about its defenses and how to best overcome them. Sadly, we don't know much about the Edo-tensei, which I suspect will be your main concern. We just know that it takes a small bit of DNA of the person you wish to resurrect. We've arranged for the destruction of several samples of old Leaf heroes that hadn't been brought back yet. It was sadly the best we could do. Sakura ordered the elders to be released and be given more comfortable accommodations. She still wasn't sold on them, since they had been Danzo's closest confidants, but she'd remained true to Naruto's ideals and reach out a hand in trust. They still left the issue of how to deal with the Edo-tensei unsolved though, and they probably didn't have the time to do research, with Konoha hunting for them. With the Edo-tensei, no stronghold would be secure enough to withstand an assault by them, except for maybe the hidden rain village if Pain cooperated. Sakura considered and then dismissed that idea. She wasn't that crazy or desperate yet. Though in the end, the idea she did come up with wasn't much more sane. There was only one individual that everyone knew was an expert on the Edo-tensei. Someone that was supposed to be dead. Though after talking to Hinata on the subject, Sakura learned he might not be as dead as assumed. This is a terrible idea, Hinata said again. She hadn't been the only one. Nearly everyone in her small circle of confidants, like Akashi and Asuma, thought she had gone mad. Sakura just nodded. It is. It is also the least terrible idea that I can think of. If you want to be a hero, making deals with the likes of him is a poor way to do it. I don't think Naruto would do this. Don't ever tell me what Naruto would or wouldn't do. I knew her much better than you. Well then, what would she say to you trying to work with one of the most evil men of our time? She would tell me that she had faith in me. Sakura knew that was true. Whether she'd be right in doing so remained to be seen. Hinata lay down in a circle with several suppressive seals. All the Kage were present as well in case this turned violent. Sakura made hand signs. Evil releasing seal! And she pressed her hand on Hinata's curse mark, pulled, and a giant white snake appeared out of it. And when that snake opened its maw, and out of that appeared the one and only Orochimaru. Now, canon explanation has it that the curse marks are basically Horcruxes. The details are vague, but I'm going to rule that this basically works similar to Nutsutsuki's Karma Seal, in that with the revival of Orochimaru, all other copies of his consciousness disappear, so we don't have multiple Orochimarus running about. So Hinata's curse mark as well as Sasuke's and the power he absorbed from Orochimaru disappear as well. This will clue Danzo in that Orochimaru has been revived. Now here is a twist, Orochimaru smirked at them. Of everyone to resurrect me, your cute little faction was the last I expected to do so. Sakura checked some timelines in her head. Sasuke told me he absorbed you not long after me and Naruto fought off Sasori. You shouldn't yet be aware of our faction. I observed the world through all those who carried my chakra, meaning everyone who carried my curse mark, including dear Sasuke. So I know why you resurrected me, and to be honest, I really have no reason to care about this war. The only reason I might get involved is that it might give me an opportunity to steal young Sasuke's body, yet he has grown far beyond my power. Orochimaru gave Hinata an evil smile. It's a true shame he couldn't get you pregnant from that one encounter. A child like that would have made a fine replacement. Guess I'm never lucky. This was a mistake, Hinata muttered. Is there a way to seal an Edo Tensei? Sakura asked. Of course there is. Saratobi Sensei sealed the first and second Hokage when I brought them back. I'd be more than happy to teach each and every one of you to reap a death seal. They knew that technique cost the user their life. Be serious. You don't strike me as someone who would study something like the Edo Tensei without also making plans for what to do if it's used against you. You must know something. And what's in it for me? Orochimaru asked. My freedom, perhaps? They had Orochimaru in a room with so many sealing jutsus, he wasn't going to leave unless they let him. No, not entirely. I can't set you loose upon the world, you're too dangerous. But I can arrange for your crimes to be pardoned by the Fire Daimyo. After that, we'll just keep an eye on you so you don't continue your inhuman experiments. But you'd be free to do whatever else you wish otherwise. That is the best I can offer. Interesting, Orochimaru said. I accept. His easy acceptance threw everyone for a loop, which caused Orochimaru to chuckle at their expense. He's obviously lying, Hinata said. You wound me, dear girl. Have you ever known me to be anything but a man of my word? We'll see. Tell us how to take down Edo Tensei summons and I'll keep my promise. Sure, Orochimaru agreed. He was enjoying how everyone was yelling at Sakura not to trust him. They were right to do so, of course. Oh, he had every intention of honoring his part of the bargain. But he also knew he would double-cross them. This wouldn't take any special effort on his part. In the end, having seals to easily get rid of defeated Edo Tenseis wouldn't matter. The immortality of the Edo Tenseis wasn't the main issue they faced. The main issue was that Danzo had both Sasuke and Itachi working for him. Orochimaru knew that not Sakura, nor any of the four Kage had any method to defeat individuals with such strong bloodlines. As soon as this alliance broke upon those two monsters, Orochimaru would consider any deals he made void. What value is a deal with a defeated faction? After that, he could either hide from the storm, or even make a deal with Danzo. It wouldn't be the first time they'd have worked together. And that's the end of part 41. Mike's out.